In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Tom Dillon. Dr. Dillon is a professor of computer information systems and business analytics at James Madison University. After 41 years in the classroom, Dr. Dillon has specialized knowledge in various topics such as health informatics, human-computer interaction, IT consulting, and systems analysis and design. The scope of his experience and wisdom does not end there. Within this discussion, we touched on his main areas of interest, along with questions regarding automation, elicitation interviews, and advice for graduates entering the, quote, real world. Thank you for tuning into the Common Human Podcast. Seek knowledge and wisdom always. Dr. Dillon, you know yourself better than anyone else, better than me, your friends, maybe even your family. So could you describe who you are to the audience, touching on your 40 years of experience or plus years of experience in the classroom and your experience and background regarding computer information systems and business analytics?
Sure. So I mostly lean towards computer information systems. I don't really do the business analytic aspects, but basically, I knew when I was 21, and I'm 63 now, that I wanted to be a college professor. And by the time I was 25, I knew that I wanted to be a college professor at James Madison University, because I've always taught the subject called computer information systems, which when I first started was actually called data processing. My earliest certifications were in data processing. But I knew I wanted to be a college professor, and I knew I wanted to be a college professor at a good university. And I knew that in 1985, when I was 25 years old, that James Madison University was a place where computer information systems was taught well, and that the students were well prepared for their lives. It's interesting that you said 40 years, because I'm now in my 41st year as a college professor. I started in the classroom in 1983, and it's interesting. I've always considered myself an educator, a teacher, and I was lucky enough to be asked to be an instructor, a computer information systems instructor, when I was 23. And I didn't even have my master's degree yet. I was paid like I had a master's degree, but I was 6 credits short because the people around me saw that I could teach. And in 1983, not that many people knew how to use a microcomputer, a desktop computer. And I had been a graduate student that unpacked all the first computers on campus. So wow. At Shippensburg University at the time, I was one of the only people on campus that knew how to use a microcomputer, what we called them at that time, a desktop computer. And so they asked me if I would stay on the faculty and teach for a year until other professors learned how to use the computer technology. And they were actually able to hire somebody who was qualified for the job, who would have the proper degrees and whatever to teach computer information systems at a university level. So it was pretty exciting, and it was a great start for me. And I've been lucky enough that I've been doing the things I love to do since 1983, when I was 23 years old. I got into the college classroom and have never really left. And like I said, I knew I wanted to be a college professor at 21, and I've been doing it ever since. And I'm really excited because I got to JMU when I was 40, and I spent the last 23 years here. And again, it's still the best place for my discipline of computer information systems. It's the best place on the East Coast to be a professor. The students are great. My colleagues are fantastic. The companies that like to hire computer information systems students are really good. The companies and firms are really good. So it's been a very rewarding experience. About me, I've been really lucky because I've been able to do the things I like to do. And not everybody in life gets to say that, but I'm pretty lucky. I have a great family, and I have great friends, and I have a fantastic wife and family, so I'm really pretty lucky that way. And they've all recognized what I like to do, and they give me the time, and they allow me to use my energies to be a college professor and to enjoy what I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that information. I also agree. JMU in itself is just an incredible university. So I'm biased in that
Yeah.
regard as well. And I'm so happy that obviously to be able to say that you are truly enjoying what you do on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
that speaks volumes, and that's not everyone gets to say that. So kudos to you. Could you go into maybe more detail regarding that the microcomputer situation in which you were kind of the only individual?
Oh, well, it was really funny. It was 1981. I was 21 and I was a college junior, and at the time, IBM had computers, and so did Apple had computers, and then other companies made computers. But because IBM had what they called an open architecture, anybody that was going to make a computer, they made their computer like IBM's. And every computer at the time, every personal computer that was a desktop model was called an IBM clone. So you could buy an IBM or you could buy a clone. And my
Okay.
university bought two Zenith microcomputers, the television company that made Zenith televisions. Well, they came out with microcomputers, and we had two of them. And we also had two Apple IIe microcomputers. And I was the person that unboxed those four computers on campus because I was a student that was in the room at the time. I unboxed those computers, and I had to put the circuit boards, plug circuit boards into them. So I took the cases off them. And so I had to use a screwdriver and pliers. And I took the cases off and I plugged in the boards and set them up, so that they could be used by everybody on campus. And then I did that initially. I was a student worker in the summer, and the university bought the computers on a federal grant. Back in the 1980s, Dan Quayle, who would then go on to become vice president, Dan Quayle wrote legislation called Women Returning to the Workforce. And the idea, I was on a grant where the university where I was, Shippensburg University where I was, had a grant to provide training for women who had left high school and had children or gotten married and never finished their education, but they wanted them to be trained to be able to rejoin the workforce. So I taught on that grant. I was a tutor on that grant, and I tutored in business English and business math, and I tutored in using microcomputers, using desktop computers. And because I was, like I said, I was a student worker, of course, I had to carry the boxes. I had to unload the boxes. I had to plug in all the boards. And because I was an education major, I was a business education major, and I wanted to be able to teach computers to my students in the future, I read all the instructions and I did all the tutorials. And because of that, then I became like the resident expert on the campus. Yeah.
That's
So
incredible.
by 1982, I was the only person on the campus, except for maybe there were two or three other people on campus, but they weren't in the business college. I was the only person in the business college who knew how to do that. And not everybody had personal computers then, because a personal computer, a desktop computer like we have now, probably cost, with the computer and a monitor and the software, they probably cost about $5,000.
Wow.
So that was in 1980, that was a big expense. When you figure, starting salaries for school teachers might be $15,000 to $20,000, what school teacher could buy themselves a computer, right? So they were a pretty big expense. Yeah. So I became the resident expert. Of course, I was totally bypassed by 1984 because people were starting to know lots of things.
Well, yeah, that's incredible first experience though, and to be able to have that influence. And was that at UMBC?
Well, no, that was actually at Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So I was only doing my undergraduate.
Oh, okay, understood.
I was only 21 years old, and it was my undergraduate at Shippensburg University. Yeah, I didn't actually get to UMBC till the late 1980s when I started graduate work there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was going to be my next question, because you did Masters of Science and Doctors of Philosophy at UMBC.
Right.
So I'm curious kind of what those classes were like, kind of how that curriculum was formatted.
Well, it's really interesting. So I got my bachelor's and master's in education from Shippensburg University. Okay. And I taught 1 year at Shippensburg University, and it sort of got me started. And then I went to a small college in Maryland called Chesapeake College, and it was a community college. So my certifications, my high school teaching certifications, allowed me to teach at the community college, but mostly wouldn't let me teach at a 4-year college university. So I taught for 2 years at Chesapeake College, and and I was thinking about doing graduate work. So nearby was Salisbury State University at the time. Now it's just Salisbury University. Salisbury University was there. It was about 3,000 to 3,500 students. And they had a computer science program that wasn't allowed to have a major because of political issues, but they had computer science faculty. And what I taught at the community college was different types of computer programming, right? And at the time, the computer programming languages were BASIC computer programming language and a language called COBOL. And COBOL is an acronym for Common Oriented Business Language, right? Common Oriented Business Programming Language. So it was interesting because I applied to the graduate program to get my MBA, because I knew that if I wanted to teach at the university level, I had to get a stronger master's degree. A master's degree in education meant that I only had 18 credits in my domain, and the other credits were in education. So I needed more credits in my domain, and computer information systems is a business domain. So I thought if I could get an MBA and my electives would be in computer information systems, I would be better prepared for university instructor. Sure. So it's funny. I applied to the MBA program at Salisbury State, and the fellow that was the fellow who was the MBA director was actually the interim dean. He was the acting dean for the summer. They had just hired a new dean. So I sent my application to him and a resume. And the funny thing, back then, everything was done on paper, right? Everything was done by paper. So I mailed it to him. And not like online applications today. I know, right? And he received my application and read it over and saw that I was an instructor at the local community college. And that same day, just by coincidence, the computer science program was looking for somebody who could teach a class I teach today at JMU called Systems Analysis and Design. And they sort of called over the business college and said, have you hired anybody new? Do you have anybody that could possibly teach this class called Systems Analysis and Design? Because it's sort of like the business aspect of computing, right? And the MBA director, who was the interim dean, said, well, we don't have anybody, but I just got a resume from a community college instructor who teaches that class. And I just noticed that on his resume because that's a class that the business computer information system students would take, but it was normally taught by the computer science department. Sure. So small colleges actually share many things that larger universities don't. So at Salisbury State, the computer science department taught courses for the business college, and the business college would teach classes for the computer science department, because at small universities, you share resources, and professors are a resource, right? Okay. So he offered me up, and it was really funny. I was in a computer lab at Chesapeake College when the phone rang, and they said, hey, would you consider teaching part-time at Salisbury State this fall, and you teach systems analysis and design? And I was like, well, yes, I'd love to do that. Could you put the class I'm going to teach the same night as the class I'm going to take? Because I was enrolling in the MBA program, and I was going to be coming down there every Monday, Wednesday. Yeah. So could you put my class either right before that or right after that? And they said yes. So I applied. So I finished my application to the MBA program, and they said to me, well, can you send us a formal letter that you're interested in teaching part-time and send us your resume? We got your resume from College of Business, but we need a formal letter from you. So I wrote my letter and I sent it in. They called me and they said, hey, how about this summer in June? Why don't you come in and we'll show you the bookstore where you order your book? Because remember, nothing was done by email or the internet at the time. We'll show you the book. We'll show you the computer lab. We'll show you the bookstore. We'll show you the classroom, and you can meet the other professors in the department. So I went for that, and it was really interesting to me. The whole department was there. All 6 people from the department showed up to see me, and I thought that was really nice. Yeah. They said to me then, after I talked about what I was doing, they said to me, we're having a hard time filling the full-time position that we're having advertised in the computer science department. And so, would you consider applying for the full-time job?
Mm-hmm.
Even though I only had a master's degree in education, because the computer science program didn't have a degree, right? They just provided courses to everybody.
Right.
They didn't care about my not having a degree in computer science, and they only expected me to be there for 1, 2, or 3 years.
Sure.
So I said yes, I'd be very interested. So I applied for the full-time job and got it. Just a month later, I had the job, and it was a great experience because then I had moved back to a 4-year university. I got to teach the classes, the university type classes, not community college classes, but the university classes that prepared me to be the professor I am today. And the great part was that computer science program, the people who taught in that program were really good teachers. And they were, I thought I taught well, but then, when you partner with people who also teach well, they teach you new and different things.
Absolutely.
And I had more camaraderie. At the community college, it was only myself and somebody, Maureen, right? There were only the two of us that taught the community college classes. Mm-hmm. So it was really great to have colleagues who taught well, who worked hard at good teaching, and also, they were supportive of me, even though I didn't necessarily have the credentials to be there. They treated me like I had the credentials to be there. And that was a really great thing. And I it was a great learning experience. By the time I got to Salisbury State University, I was only 26 years old, and I had great colleagues, and they treated me like I was in my 30s. I was surprised, how well they treated me. But it was a great experience, and that's what sort of helped me decide, where I wanted to go for my PhD program. Because at that point in time, the Salisbury State University, Salisbury University was part of the University of Maryland system, and I could go to University of Maryland schools and get tuition for free.
Okay.
So that's what propelled me to go to UMBC, and that's what got me at UMBC. And the interesting thing is, my doctoral program was only like 2 or 3 years old when I applied for it, and so it was very new. So they were looking for good students, and I was looking for a doctoral program like UMBC's. So here's the exciting thing about UMBC's doctoral program. When you're a business faculty member and you teach in a college of business like me, often if you want to get your PhD in information systems, your information systems program might come from a college of business. And that would mean you would take additional college of business type classes, management, marketing, finance, economics, and accounting. But at UMBC, the information systems program was a master's of science in information systems, and it was a PhD in information systems. So I didn't have to take any classes that were general business courses. I could just take classes in information systems. And that made me a better professor because, I got to take more advanced classes in networking. I got to take more advanced classes in database. I got to take more advanced classes in the course I loved best, systems analysis and design.
Absolutely.
And because I could take these classes and they were more advanced than the courses that I had taught before, because they were more advanced, I was more informed because at this time, I hadn't really had business experience, right? I had just been a professor. Now, the great thing is, though, once I was at Salisbury State, because of my communication skills, I networked well, and I met a woman who had a consulting firm who did computer information systems consulting. And for 2 years, she hired me part-time. And that also improved what I could teach and how I would teach, because I had then real world consulting experience. So so it was like a combination of things. I always wanted to know my content better because, again, I only had that master's degree in education. I only had 18 credits in information systems. I needed stronger computer information systems work experience and stronger computer information systems coursework that would push me forward. So that's 100%. Why I got to UMBC, and I loved my doctoral program there because it was totally in computer information systems, and it moved me forward in all the subjects that I teach now to undergraduates but it provided me with more experience and more complex problems. And that way, I learned on the jobs in a sense.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just gathering all the information you stated there, it's quite incredible because you almost you were reinforced by your environment in which you could learn just based on the curriculum, but then it also reinforced and gave you the ability to have a very grounded and solid knowledge in order to teach. So
and that's a great interpretation. Incredible. You're right. In life, in life, there are points in your life where little things happen, but they change your direction, right? They make you, they make you more successful than you think you could have been, right? Because you fall into something, right? I sort of fell into the job at Salisbury State University that made me better, right? And then I sort of, because I went to Salisbury State University, I looked for doctoral programs, in the university system, the University of Maryland system,
right?
Because I was getting free tuition. I would definitely go to a place where I could get free tuition as opposed to going to University of Pittsburgh or University of, or Temple University or whatever, right? I sort of fell into, a great job at Salisbury State where I was groomed and prepared to be a better educator. I fell into a great doctoral program where I was prepared to learn my subject matter at a higher level, and I also, bumped into a consultant when I was in Salisbury who liked my verbal skills and my general computer information system skills, but she allowed me to expand those skills and become a better, became a better consultant, which then also made me a better teacher. And it's really interesting. If you're lucky enough that you have these events in your life, you have to take them.
Yeah, capitalize.
I was lucky that I had these opportunities and I was able to take them.
That's incredible. Yeah, and it's coincidental, but it worked on the scope in which you were going in life. So that's amazing. So switching gears just a little bit. So one of your research interests was health informatics.
Right.
So a discipline at an intersection between information science, computer science, and healthcare. So could you elaborate on what health informatics is?
Oh yeah. So interestingly, right, at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, there is no College of Business. So I was glad in some ways I didn't have to take business courses that didn't apply to me directly to the education I wanted. But in computer information systems, you normally apply your information systems skills to some domain. And I was really lucky because UMBC is close to University of Maryland, Baltimore. And University of Maryland, Baltimore, they were actually sort of tied together when I first got there. University of Maryland, Baltimore is where the medical school is for the University of Maryland system. So they produce physicians at University of Maryland Medical, Baltimore. That's where they produce physicians and doctorates in nursing and doctorates in areas that are totally in medicine and healthcare. And I was so lucky because I was starting to look at courses that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed this class called Human-Computer Interaction. And one of my earliest experiences with human-computer interaction was how people talk to computers and how people listen to computers. Now, I have to admit, I got interested in that because as a young adult, I'm a Star Trek fan. And it always interested me on when Captain Kirk, or in this case, Captain Picard, would get in the turbo lift, and he would say to the lift, 10 forward, which was which is a bar actually on the Next Generation's, it's where the bar is where people go and drink. So he would say 10 forward, and the lift would move up and sideways and take him to 10 forward. He would get in the elevator, or the lift, they call it, and he would say bridge, and the elevator would take him to the bridge. So I always wondered how he could say bridge, and the elevator would take him to the bridge, but at the same time, he would be having a conversation with somebody else, and he might say, well, I met with Geordie LaForge today at 10 forward. How come the lift didn't stop and then go to 10 forward, right? So he gave a direction to go to the bridge, but in conversation, he said, how about 10 forward? and that should have taken them to the 10 forward.
Right.
So I was always interested in how you talk to a computer and how the grammars would be set up so that the commands can be accepted by the computer, but unimportant verbiage from the human wouldn't misdirect you. So I was really lucky in my doctoral program. I was in this human-computer interaction mode, and a professor of nursing met me, and said, "I hear you're working with speech, speech components, talking to and listening to computers." I said, "Yes."
Right.
And she said to me, "Well, there's money for that in the federal government, and you can apply to Health and Human Services for a grant. And that grant could pay for your doctoral research. You'd be paid to do your dissertation work." So I asked about it. I filled out the application. I submitted it. The Health and Human Services, actually, and the Veterans Administration liked my proposal, but they didn't give me the money. They found two men that were nurses that were getting their PhDs in health informatics. And they took classes with me, and they gave them the money because they said, "Hey, could you guys do this research?" And they were like, "Yes." So they were like in my human computer interaction class. So,
Right.
But at that point in time, I then started to develop relationships with nursing and those people in the University of Maryland, Baltimore Medical School. So when I started to look towards my dissertation research, which was on spoken language interaction in a healthcare task, right? I was able to I did my research on how nurses would talk to a computer system gathering, data for a cardiovascular exam. So when you're taking a cardiovascular exam, your doctor or your nurse is gathering 32 data points. They're taking pulses, impulses, pressures. They're going to gather like 32 different data points because you have a pulse in your neck and you have a pulse on your wrist. You have a pulse in your ankle, right? There's pulses all over your body. And for a thorough cardiovascular exam, you gather these 32 pulses, right? Pulses, impulses, and different things, blood pressures and whatever. So because of that, then I actually took a couple of classes in the health sciences at UB when I was doing my PhD. And when I was coming out, I realized that because I'd published using nurses and I published some of my data in nursing journals and in human computer interaction journals, I sort of had a specialty in health informatics, and that specialty was very helpful. When you do your dissertation, right, it's like this 2 or 3 years of study. And when you do your dissertation, you become very self-centered. Because it's your dissertation, it's your research, and it has to be done in your time frame, and you have to meet this committee's approval. And what I realized was that if I was going to do some type of research like that, I really thought it should apply to something real. I thought that it should apply to be helpful in society, So I really enjoyed the aspect of applying my research to healthcare, using nurses in my study, and being able to publish in healthcare journals because it just gave me a good feeling inside that I was making a contribution to society. So I really enjoyed health informatics while I did that. It was a great thing. And now I've been away from it for probably about 10 years now. So I no longer have, I no longer have health informatics floating in my head. You'll find college professors have a lot of things floating in their heads. And I don't have that floating in my head anymore. So yeah, but it was a great time in my life. And it just so happens at the same time, my wife was getting her bachelor's degree in nursing. So I had
convenient as well.
A resident expert, that I could ask questions from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it worked out really well.
Yeah. That's incredible. So you said you don't necessarily have stuff floating in your head, but I'm curious if you could probably answer this one question: how technology in the health world, how does that streamline workflow and optimize processes in which that technology is communicating with one other technology in order to optimize processes for nurses taking notes?
There's some simple examples for that now. There's a software package out there called it's made by a company called Epic, and Epic is probably the premier medium-sized hospital electronic patient record system, electronic patient records. And Epic also has something attached to it called MyChart. And if you're a patient of a hospital or a physician's office that uses Epic, you can actually go on the MyChart and you can communicate with your physician or your provider, your nurse practitioner, or your physician's assistant. You can communicate with them without phone calls. You can order your medications, through the MyChart, right?
Pretty sure CVS has one.
Yeah. So what I would say is that, using technology in healthcare has made things really easy because, if you want to reorder your medications and you're sitting with your phone, you can go to your MyChart and you can order your medication with a couple swipes and a couple clicks, with your phone, and your medication's ordered, as opposed to calling your doctor's office and getting a busy signal, right? Or a message from the doctor that says they're busy. And you should leave a long message, detailed message with your phone number, your name, your birth date, and the medication that you need, right?
Right.
So today you can just go order that online instead of leaving a voicemail that you don't know if it's been picked up or not.
Sure.
But then you get a message from MyChart that says your medication order has been placed. It's available at the Walmart pharmacy, and you can pick it up at this time. So everything, technology has been simplifying many things in our lives, And now what I worked with spoken language interaction, you don't see a lot of in healthcare. But I think anybody that's using Alexa or Siri or Hello Google, right? They're using the stuff that I experimented with in the 1990s, the grammars necessary, right? And so that that language can be read.
Sure. Do you have maybe like concrete examples within the nursing and healthcare world where the technology, kind of optimizes those processes? Because you speak of great examples such as Alexa and these voice command systems.
Like today, it used to be your physician would come in and they would sit across from you and they would have nothing in their hands, right? And they would talk to you. And then after that was done, they would say, okay, now I'm going to order your meds. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'll do this. And we're done. And they would walk out and you would walk out, right? And your meds might not be ordered, or you don't know if the doctor caught all the exact stuff. Today, your doctor comes in either with a laptop or a tablet, or their nurse comes in with a laptop or tablet. And everything that they're going to do, they're recording on that tablet, probably in some product that resembles MyChart, but it's more designed for the physician or the physician's assistant or the nurse practitioner or their nurse. They check all that stuff off and they'll just double check with you. Oh, you're still getting your medications at the Walmart pharmacy, or did you move to the Kroger? Right. Okay. So the idea is, so they're carrying all that into the room with you now. And, 15 years ago, no one brought computers into the physician's office.
Right.
10 years ago, physicians started to bring computers into the office, and people complained because they were like, and he spent more time looking at that computer than he did me. Right. And today, if they don't bring the computer into the office, you're thinking they're missing something. Right. Or if they're not with the computer, or the nurse isn't with the computer. Right. So I think there's a gradual trend in society to accept this influx of tablets, phones, technology, and laptops in a business setting, and that in any professional setting, whether it be with a healthcare professional or an office or your accountant. I know when I used to go into my accountant's office, she would write everything out on a tablet. And now we meet in her office and she keys stuff into her laptop as we talk. So I think there's a convenience there. And most of that convenience has to do with like the idea of portability of technology.
Sure.
Remember, no longer like the 1983 $5,000 desktop that you had to take apart with a screwdriver, right? Now everything's portable. It's flexible. The software is written to be easier understood. It's screen dependent, where we just touch things on your screen instead of even clicking keys. So it's all becoming easier and easier, whether it's in healthcare, or whether it's in your accountant's office,
Any industry.
or any industry. Yeah. I,
Yeah.
as a college professor, I'm amazed at what my students can do with their laptops and their tablets while I'm
Right.
talking, right? While I'm
Yep.
talking. They're,
All the games they can play and
right,
all
all the
the
games they can play,
different.
how much ESPN scores they can watch.
Right.
But
How many
it's still-
screens they can put on for ESPN, tennis, or
But
whatever.
they're still taking notes, and they're still using their educational software. We
Mhm.
use Canvas in our classroom. They're still using
Right.
Canvas. They're downloading documents. It's amazing what they can do.
No, 100%. So kind of my last question in this broader question of health informatics and just technology in general. What is the definition of interoperability? So I guess the communication between a tablet and another tablet within a particular industry. How does that software and that programming work in order for those two technology bases to communicate?
It's interesting because I just heard on the news that the European Union is now requiring that all computers sold, and computers which would be phones, tablets, laptops, have to have a universal charging port. So the port in our phone, right? The port in your phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
The port in the phone has to be universal, which means that Apple by 2025 has to move away from the Apple charging port to a more standard one, which is the one that's being used now by Android devices, by Google phones and Samsung phones or whatever.
Sure.
So because the European Union is forcing that issue and that's to improve the interoperability so that consumers can buy something more standard, not have to pay large prices for something specific. And so that interoperability is very important, right?
Yeah.
Because all this technology has to be able to talk, and it has to be able to talk, because if it doesn't talk, who's being left out? So
exactly.
If you're a more consumer aware society, like the European Union says that it is, they're forcing that issue, right? The interesting comment, the commentator on the radio was that, well, you have to remember that Google and Apple aren't European businesses. They're American businesses. So they can make these changes, which will drive the industry, because Google and Apple aren't constituents. They're not voting for people. They don't, their governor, their senator, their House of Representative members, they're all in the United States. So so it's interesting how the Europeans are sort of pushing the United States to be more interoperable, right, with technology. So that all that technology will talk better, because
100%.
they don't originate that technology. Their constituents haven't created Google. Their constituents didn't create Apple.
And I feel like that EU news, European Union, it's almost, I feel as if that's a more sustainable lifestyle for their technology, in which for Apple, that's obviously their competitive advantage, in which they're making more money based off the chargers and their unique ports and things of that nature. But obviously, I feel as if Americans adopted that would probably save a lot of money. We're not scrambling around looking for particular things to put on our Apple chargers and things of that nature.
So there's benefits of each, right? In some ways, you think, the American system has been very successful at that entrepreneurship, developing those technologies. But then again, maybe we're not mastering ourselves as well as the Europeans are going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my other question would be, kind of shifting gears a little bit. I know you did a study with your colleagues back in about 2022 regarding elicitation interviews. Could you go into detail?
Again, this is one great reason I'm at JMU, because we do innovative things. So it's interesting. Most of the students that we prepare at JMU in the computer information systems field become IT consultants, or they become business analysts. And in both those areas, as a consultant or as an analyst, the recent graduating student has to go out, and what they have to do is they have to interview people. The most important thing when you're going to design a new system, or you're going to improve a system, is be able to find out from the end users what the system really has to do. What is the overall goal of the system? And in our discipline, we sort of call that requirements. What are the requirements for the new system?
Right.
And these requirements, even though requirements is sort of a vague term, but it's sort of like, what are the exact needs to make this successful? Or what are the requirements to make it successful? So I was really lucky. I just worked with a team of people from JMU, all to teach computer information systems, but we also teamed with JMU has a great Center for Faculty Innovation, and we also have a great Office of Assessment. So we teamed with people that teach assessment, and we teamed with people that teach well and that help us learn how to teach well in the Center for Faculty Innovation. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to teach our students how to be good interviewers. They could actually interview an end user, a client, and find out what they needed their new system to do, whether that system was in healthcare or whether it was, a small business, but they could interview them and find out what the system can do. And that term, that technical term, is called requirements elicitation, or we elicitate requirements, right?
Sure.
So in our discipline, the idea of being able to gather good requirements is key. So we did a research project where we read about gathering requirements. We read our literature. We did a thorough literature review. And then because we wanted to be better at it, I did requirements gathering in my professional life, but that was in the 1980s. And Dr. Lending, who I worked with, did requirements gathering in her professional life, but that was in the 1990s, right?
Okay.
So what we wanted to know is, how was requirements elicitation being done today? And we wanted to make sure that we were teaching our students how to do it right. So we were lucky, we have alumni, and I contacted some of our alumni. Well, I contacted big companies, and we thought we would want to drive somewhere to pick it up because they weren't really be here, and we weren't using Zoom technologies then. But so I thought, well, let's try Richmond, and we have great student success stories working for Capital One, a large bank. Absolutely. And we have great student success stories of students working for a company called CapTech. It was called CapTech Ventures at the time. Now I think it's just CapTech Consulting. But CapTech is a company that provides consulting and for Virginia state government and for commercial businesses. So we actually got one of our alums and a young man that graduated from Virginia Tech, but they were both experts now in requirements elicitation. They interviewed customers to find out what their needs were. So we audio taped them because we didn't have phones with cameras yet. We audio taped them on the requirements elicitation processes, and they brainstormed and told us how they did it. And we reviewed the literature on how it would be done. And then we also, interestingly, then took our students, and we had our students do a requirements elicitation interview, and we videotaped them. And it was really interesting to us because we learned from the experts, right? We learned from experts. We learned from the research literature on requirements elicitation. But also, when we videotaped our students and we analyzed our students, we realized there were certain things that the students would do in the interviews that would get better requirements, gather better requirements, and would gather worse requirements. So we learned from both our students during the process, we learned from experts during the process, and we learned from the literature. And then what we did probably 5 research papers and published papers on how to teach requirements. One, how we gathered our requirements elicitation data, how we learned how to be good requirements elicitators, how we gathered the data, how we would teach requirements elicitation, right? And then how we would assess, because we worked with people in the Office of Assessment at JMU, how we assess the requirements elicitation, right? And then ultimately we put the whole thing together so that other college professors could read our work and from like beginning to end almost and see how we gathered our data, how we learned from the process, how we teach it to our students, how we assess their outcomes. And then we sort of published that as a paper. And that was for me, as someone who's wanted to be a college professor since 1981, who wanted to
Right.
teach computer information systems as best as I could. That was like unbelievably rewarding because, we got to do it well and then share it. We published it in education journals so other professors that teach computer information systems could read it and see it. Right.
Okay. So
And
what were, oh, sorry, go ahead.
so I was finishing. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I was just curious regarding kind of the qualitative and quantitative evidence you guys gathered
Right.
from. Well, I was just reading the study, and it basically said that you guys were able to gain both qualitative and quantitative evidence and kind of takeaways. So I'm just curious
Yeah. Well,
what those were.
so qualitatively, when you're videotaping people who are doing it, right? You can actually look at like every so many frames to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then with what you understand from the literature and what you understand from the experts, you can say this was moving forward or maybe not. So qualitatively you could write about the processes and the procedures that were there, and though there was no exact hard data, right? You could use, in a sense, almost like case analysis to determine what we were doing. And there's actually a thread of research out there where when you look at video of people, you can actually pick out things from the videos. And what we did was we developed a rubric to evaluate performance. And then from that rubric, then we started to gather quantitative data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we would do is we had a whole bunch of computer information systems professors who teach systems analysis and design. We had them watch the videos and score the students with the rubric, right? And then if you take the means of the rubric scores, right, then you sort of have a good qualitative measure. And so, by having a bunch of our colleagues participate, the good thing about that is that the colleagues that participated become more experts at teaching requirements gathering or requirements solicitation, and they start to recognize how you can introduce that topic throughout your curriculum. So it worked great, both qualitatively and then quantitatively. We were able to publish great data on how we move students from not knowing how to do the requirement solicitation interviews to actually knowing how to do it and actually doing it well.
Okay, understood. So basically the process was a student was questioning another student in which they were trying to ask better questions in order to get better results, basically was.
Well, actually, we actually had professors role play the client.
Okay.
So a student team of 3, 4, or 5 students would interview the professor who was role playing the client. And we used the same case study. So initially, with all the initial data, the same professor for continuity, the same professor answered all the questions.
Okay.
All the student groups, right?
What kind of questions were asked?
Well, when you're looking at that, there's a couple of different types of questions. There are like to begin with, there's questions of relationship creating. And when you start to interview somebody, you want to ask them questions to create a relationship with them so that there's a feeling of a good communications and honesty in the communication. Right? So you ask questions about communicating. You then ask questions about the system that they want. And they can ask questions, both open-ended and closed-ended questions. And then it begins a flow of conversation, right? So they ask questions about the system. What, who's going to use this system, right?
Right.
If they are going to use the system, how do you envision them using it on a phone or on a laptop or a tablet? And then the software, should we design the software that it is usable on a phone and tablet, or do we need to make it the software keystroke, oriented? And if you're going to do this, how secure does this system have to be? Because if somebody picks up the tablet and the software is on it, can somebody open up that app and get access to your software, or do they have to do a password? Right. So we had them ask questions about what hardware they might benefit from, what the software would be, what type of data they needed, and then how secure the systems would have to be. Right. So they asked a bunch of questions like that. And when we evaluated them, based on, did they develop a good rapport with the client? did they have a good rapport with their teammates asking the questions?
Mm-hmm.
Did they work together well as a team, right?
Yeah.
Did they have a good understanding of the system before the conversation started? Did they know the application they were trying to analyze? The students would have to study and understand the application. Did they ask questions about the new system and how the new system would change? So in a sense, we looked at a number of different things. And then, what we found, though, is that we really prepared students well, that they did have a good opening and a good closing, that they did ask good questions about the hardware, the software, and how it would meet the client's needs.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm just trying to understand this. Within the context of information systems, it was almost a questioning system for consultants and individuals to kind of gain better results when asking questions to other individuals in an interview process.
Right. And that's really what we're trying to do. And we, what we realized early on is that, does a 22-year-old really know how to ask a business executive or a small business owner how to improve their computer system? Right. Because they're called into the room because somebody needs a new system. It has to be new or improved. Mm-hmm. So the idea was to get the kids prepared, even minimally, so that if they do find themselves sitting across from a client, right, they have a multi-step process that they can go through to initiate that conversation. Because so much today, it's really funny. Probably 10 years ago, I was sitting in my office and a student came in and said, well, I'm not going to major in computer information systems because my economics professor said that computers can now write software. and they can.
Sure.
With ChatGPT can write software. It can actually write code. So I said to her, well, that's not what a CIS major is. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, we teach you how to write computer codes, right? We teach you Python and Java. I said, but what we really teach you how to do is analyze a business situation and design a solution. That solution could be code. That solution could be wireless. That solution could be mobile, right? That solution could be in the cloud. But you as the business analyst make those decisions. So yes, ChatGPT can write code. But you as a business analyst have to say, this is the code that has to be written.
Right. Exactly. Your influence is still there.
Right.
As a human being.
As a human being. Right. So we really work hard at teaching our kids how to ask those questions so that they can understand how to design a solution. And if our kids know how to design a solution, then sure, they can actually enter in the parameters of the ChatGPT, and ChatGPT can write the code. But our kids will be the ones who'll have to install it on the software or create the environment where it can be installed, on a tablet or a phone or a laptop or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe a conversation for another time regarding kind of automation and outsourcing particular jobs such as accounting, janitorial processes, things of that nature. I saw a robot going into a bathroom recently, cleaning it completely. Like it's unbelievable.
And the good thing about that is like I just said, the CIS role doesn't get outsourced. Right. Now, maybe our roles will become more efficient, so they may not need as many CIS graduates as we produce now, because they'll be more efficient at designing solutions. Right. Right. It's really interesting. In our major, we teach something called business process modeling. And all the business majors get that in their operations class. They probably get 1 or 2 days of it. But in the computer information systems major, we probably spend 3 or 4 weeks on it as a junior, and then 2 weeks of it as a senior. And what you can do now is you can actually do a business process model where it's basically made up of lines and ovals and forks and joins and things like that. Sure. Our students can actually create that business process model, and you can feed that into a product. There's a product out there called Appian, and you could feed that into Appian, and Appian, like ChatGPT, will write the code.
Okay.
But it takes the business major to understand the business process to
Exactly.
create the model that then can write the code. So,
Right.
I think, sure, some of our tasks will be automated. And in the future, they might not need as many CIS majors. But I think right now, they need a lot of CIS majors because
Right.
these changes are all taking place.
100%. Yeah. And us emotional human beings still have a vital and crucial role in the
Sure.
process of the
Right.
AI conversation and all of that. So with the last bit of time that we have here, I want to, kind of tell the story of you kind of coming up to me in Shoker and in the business college of business hall and just asking a random student at the time about a survey in order to, kind of implement and show the class. And I just thought that spoke volumes. I thought it was, seeing a student, even though you're a professor, eye to eye and just asking advice. So I feel as if you could answer this question to perfection. What advice do you give to an individual, a recent graduate, or an individual that has just graduated, entering the quote unquote real world?
What I would say first is that you should make the best of your college experience. Try to get good grades, but while you're here at JMU or wherever you're at school, you should do something great. I was always impressed with students that become leaders in their fraternity, and their fraternity raises money for breast cancer, right? Mm-hmm. It's a great way for young people, sororities and fraternities, to do great things. But also, I'm also impressed with students who volunteer to build homes after hurricanes. While you're at college, get good grades, but try to do something great while you're there, because that really differentiates you from everybody else. Unless everybody does something great, and then that's better overall, right? But going out, best advice I would tell people is that try to find a job that you like, in an environment you should like. I can't express my happiness at becoming a college professor, doing it now for over 40 years, and loving every minute of what I do. Your disposition is different when you're loving what you do. Your engagement with the people around you is different. The possibility for you to think and solve problems is different if you're loving what you do. If your brain isn't cluttered with disappointment or frustration or unhappiness,
Absolutely.
So yeah, I would just try to find things that try to find the thing you like, which is really funny because, like, I have kids and they're like, I'm not sure what I want to do yet that I'm 30 years old. And I'm like, well, that's okay. But you've always known what you want to do. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm like, I was lucky. I fell into something that fit me. Everybody doesn't fall into those things. It takes us times to find ourselves. So yeah, so as you're finding yourself, find yourself, in a way that it brings happiness to you. What's that woman that rearranges your furniture or your drawers and says, this should bring joy, right? So
organization or something of that nature.
But I find that I'm lucky. I have a job that brings me joy. I engage with young people that brings me joy. I solve problems that are interesting to me, which brings me joy. So I think I'm lucky, and I don't think everybody, everybody hasn't done the exact thing that I've been able to do for 4 years. But I think in the long run, try to do that.
No, absolutely. I was, excuse me, I was just going to ask kind of if you have a philosophy of life, but it's coming across in such an incredible way that it's almost trust your gut. I mean, it's trust your gut, get to a point where you can love what you do, but it's maybe just rather the intuition rather than the external chasing the money or chasing an occupation that seems cool, but isn't truly aligning with your values and things of that nature.
Right. Well, and that's like you said, if you're a college professor, you're really never chasing money. We're college professors' salaries are pretty flat. We get regular cost of living increases, and that's about it. But I think if you find something that makes you happy, I think that's a good thing. And I was lucky to do that. And again, I was able, I applied to get to JMU 3 times, and I was turned down 3 times. Didn't even get a letter response back that we received your application, right? And when I came here the fourth time, it was the key point, right? So don't give up on your dream. My dream was to be a college professor to teach computer information systems at James Madison University. And I had that dream when I was like 25, 26 years old, and I got here when I was 40. And realistically, I've tried to make the best of it in every way.
Right. Yeah, it's maintaining a level of persistence, yet at the same time always following your dreams.
Right.
I mean, we're kids living in adult bodies at this point, and it's truly just being able to pursue those dreams. So that's incredible, Dr. Dillon. Yep. And I want to say thank you so much for your time and being a part of the Common Human podcast.
No problem. It's been great. Thanks so much for asking, Lukas.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I'll talk to you soon.